Good evening, everybody. Delegates at the Republican National Convention today unanimously and officially nominating President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence to lead them to another victory in November. The Republicans' nomination announced after an in-person roll call vote in Charlotte, North Carolina, a move already upstaging the radical Dems' dull, lackluster, even occasionally lifeless virtual roll call last week for China Joe Biden. Both President Trump and Vice President Pence made their own surprise in-person appearances in Charlotte to thank all of the delegates from all across the country. Vice President Pence rejected the radical Dems' suggestion that, quote, democracy is on the ballot this November, and offered this contrasting and much brighter message.
The economy is on the ballot. Law and order is on the ballot. Our most cherished ideals of freedom and free markets are on the ballot. That's why we need 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House.
President Trump, afterwards giving his own rousing kickoff speech, he appeared in high spirits. President Trump using the crowd's chants of 4 more years to troll the radical Dems and, of course, the left-wing national media.
Thank you very much. Now, if you want to really drive him crazy, you say 12 more years.
President Trump also warning the delegates about the radical Dems' continued push for unsolicited mail-in voting, declaring that would open up November's election to outright fraud.
80 million mail-in ballots that they're working on, sending them out to people that didn't ask for them. They didn't ask, they just get them. And it's not fair and it's not right. You have to watch, because bad things happened last time with the spying on our campaign, and that goes to Biden and that goes to Obama. And this time they're trying to do it with the whole post office scam. They'll blame it on the post office. You could see them setting it up. Be very careful and watch it very carefully, because we have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country.
The president's remarks riling up the left-wing national media, just as you would expect. CNN cut away from the president's speech after 20 minutes. They had important, usual partisan analysis to offer their viewers. And MSNBC, well, it tried to, quote, fact-check the president with banners on their screen. Both networks did no such thing during their nearly wall-to-wall coverage of the Democrat National Convention. MSNBC pushing its usual party-produced propaganda, as did CNN. There you see the free airtime for Democrats. We'll keep you posted on how that works out over the course of this week with the Republicans. The left-wing media doing their absolute worst to cut down opening speeches tonight at the RNC. What is it exactly they're afraid of? Scheduled to speak are the likes of Donald Trump Jr., Senator Tim Scott, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, all three sure to strongly tout the president's historic success in his first term and cheer the president's agenda for the upcoming second term, which includes the creation of 10 million new jobs, putting a stop to America's reliance on China, defending law enforcement and police, ending illegal immigration, and eradicating the China virus. President Trump is expected to speak again tonight at the convention, where the president will thank frontline workers who are fighting the China virus pandemic. Last night at the White House, President Trump announced a new weapon in that fight for those frontline workers, authorizing the emergency use of convalescent plasma, an historic development in the president's Operation Warp Speed, which the president today once again praised.
And yet you saw yesterday convalescent plasma. You saw remdesivir. You'll soon see vaccines pouring out years ahead of what they would have been under a more traditional, let's use that term because it's nicer, a more traditional administration. where they would have taken years to come up with this stuff. We're coming up with it like nobody's ever seen before.
The president obviously having a good time, and the delegates certainly as well. President Trump and the Republican convention underway. Another Democrat-run city, though, is dealing with violent chaos. Police in Kenosha, Wisconsin, shot a black man, Jacob Blake, 7 times in the back as he tried to get into his car. He appeared to be reaching for something in the front seat of that car. Police say they were there to respond to a domestic incident, but gave no further details about what led up to the shooting. Witnesses claim Blake was trying to break up a fight between 2 women when officers arrived. One witness reports Blake pushed past police and was tasered before the shooting. The shooting caused arson, vandalism, and thugs to riot in the streets. Businesses were torched, buildings destroyed. Those who have and continue to demand justice, equality, and accountability for black lives in our country. End quote. Joe Biden and his running mate, Kamala Harris, also fanning flames of racial tension. Biden called the shooting another example of, quote, systemic racism. Harris used a tweet to demand an immediate investigation of the shooting, as if there wouldn't be one. A curfew already imposed for tonight. A state of emergency has been declared in Kenosha, Wisconsin, trying to curb a second night of rioting. Left-wing activist Sean King also contributing to tensions. He tweeted his own version of a rallying cry for the left-wing mob. He tweeted today that, quote, I'm not going to call for peace. We've tried peace for years. Y'all don't understand that language. Excuse me. We are calling for a complete dismantling of American policing. It's not broken. It was built to work this way. And mayhem is the consequence. You earned it. King's endorsement of mob violence on the streets of America, also an endorsement of another deadly weekend across the country in Democrat-run cities. 66 people shot, 5 killed in Chicago. At least 45 more shot, 8 killed in New York City. Police in Portland declared a riot on what is now the 88th straight night of violence in that city. Left-wing activists set a fire at the city's North Precinct. They attacked police officers. They were throwing rocks, bottles, and using lasers against the officers. The violence in these Democrat-run cities ignored last week by the Radical Dems convention, as was the threat of China. President Trump today made it clear China will be a focus of this convention and his campaign leading up to Election Day. President Trump says China has taken advantage of our nation for decades, and it will only get worse if he isn't president.
China had the worst year they've had in 67 years prior to the plague, the worst year they've had in decades and decades, and we had the best year we've ever had. But we took in billions from China. We never took in 10 cents from China, never took in 10 cents. They took China for 25 years, and not only Obama, for 25 years, China was taking in anywhere between 200 billion with a B and $550 billion from the United States. I give them all the credit, number one, for being smart and outfoxing all of the people that stood here and their representatives. But China, we built China. We helped build. We gave them $300, $400, $500 billion a year. Because before that, and before the World Trade Organization and they getting into it, China was flatlined. It was after that happened. And then they took advantage of us because we didn't have people that were smart enough to see. And by the way, Biden would be the worst of all of them because his son took out $1.5 billion and he gets fees on $1.5 billion, which is millions of dollars a year. Give me a break. China will own our country if this guy gets elected. We can't let it happen. We can't let it happen.
The president's comments come as the Justice Department arrested and charged Zhendong Chang, a Texas A&M professor and NASA researcher who was secretly collaborating with a Chinese university and at least one Chinese-owned company as part of China's government's 1,000 Talents program. U.S. Attorney Ryan Patrick saying, quote, China is building an economy and academic institutions with bricks stolen from others all around the world. The Chinese Talents program exploits our open and free universities, to say nothing of what has been lax enforcement of U.S. law, and that is apparently ending. It was a strong day on Wall Street, a record-setting day on Wall Street as we began this new trading week. The Dow rallied 378 points. The S&P hitting our new record close up 34 points, the 16th record close of this year. The Nasdaq up 68 points, its 37th record close of the year. This is a rebound, ladies and gentlemen. Volume on the big board, 3.8 billion shares. Crude oil finishing at $42.44 a barrel. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, schools across the nation changing their curriculum because of Black Lives Matter. We'll tell you just how many teachers support the Marxist movement when we come back. Our guest, Larry Elder. And my new book, The Trump Century, How Our President Changed the Course of History Forever, now available for pre-order. Get your copies at my new website, LouDobbsShop.com, as well as Amazon.com. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
This program.
If you're like I was, you're tired of warning.
Breaking news now. Jerry Falwell Jr. has resigned as president of Liberty University. His resignation comes after Falwell had said he and his wife were being blackmailed by their former pool boy and family friend, identified as Giancarlo Granda. Falwell's wife, Becky, apparently had an affair with Granda, and the Falwells invested in a gay-friendly hostel that Granda ran. Falwell claims Granda had tried to extort them, asking for large amounts of money to keep their activities secret, an allegation that Granda denies. The fact is, Falwell is out. Also breaking tonight, the radical left teaching our children is changing their curricula in response to Black Lives Matter. One black superintendent near Fort Worth, Texas, says, quote, we can't control what happens with the police, but we can control what happens in our school systems. I guess parents and school boards have nothing to do about that. A recent Education Week survey found 81% of teachers support the Black Lives Matter movement, the Marxist movement, Black Lives Matter. By the way, 70% of U.S. teachers are in teachers' unions. Well, writer Jamel Hill says, quote, if you were of the opinion that the United States wasn't nearly as bad as Nazi Germany, how wrong you are, end quote. Hill is working on a documentary on Colin Kaepernick for Disney. Here's NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell on not listening to Kaepernick.
I wish we had listened earlier, Cap, to what you were kneeling about and what you were trying to bring attention to. We had invited him in several times to have the conversation, have the dialogue. Mm-hmm. I wish we had the benefit of that. Yeah. We never did. And, you know, we would have benefited from that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, joining us now is Larry Elder. He's the host of The Larry Elder Show on the Salem Radio Network, also the executive producer of the extraordinary documentary, Uncle Tom, The Oral History of American Black Conservatives. Great to have you with us. Let's start, first of all, the spectacular remarks of Roger Goodell. He wished that he had listened to Colin Kaepernick earlier. Your reaction to that?
I think it's just extraordinary the way this so-called Black Lives Matter movement has cowed all of these people into making these statements. The whole thing is premised upon a false notion, and the false notion is that black people are being killed by the police just because they're black. The data do not support that. If anything, the data shows that the police are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black person than on a white person. And there's no perspective here. There are 50 million interactions with the police every single year that result in about 10 million arrests. Around 60,000 officers were assaulted in 2017, yet despite all of that, only, in quotes, about 1,000 people were killed by the police. 500 of them were white, by the way. Twice as many whites were killed by the police as blacks, and at least as many unarmed whites, if not more, are killed by the police every single year. But the media, Van Jones, CNN, MSNBC, Hee-Haw, they don't seem to care if it's a white person being killed, if it's an unarmed white person being killed by a cop. So the whole thing is driven by this lie that America remains an institutionally racist nation, and the reason for that lie is because the Democrats need that lie to coerce and to frighten blacks into pulling that lever for them, and to convince guilty white liberals to do the same thing. That's why that narrative is driven, and it's hurting the country, because what happens is the police pull back. Bad guys know that, and the people who are hurt are the very people that Black Lives Matter claims that they care about.
Are you shocked in any way that so many Americans are just rolling over for the nonsensical claim that police departments everywhere are monolithic, that they are flawed, that there is systemic racism rampant? Where the hell were these people for the last 50 years? How many of them didn't see the progress this country has made? I mean, it's really stunning to me. And corporations are supporting this activism that is Marxist in philosophy, in tactic. It's really deeply troubling.
I am surprised. When you look at police departments like in Chicago, like in New York, like in L.A., the departments pretty much reflect the demographics of their city. And these cities have had police chiefs of color, at least Chicago has, and L.A. has. L.A. had back-to-back black police chiefs, Lou, from 1992 to 2002 during the O.J. Simpson case, and that didn't stop people from accusing the LAPD of framing an innocent man by the racist LAPD. So I am surprised by all of this. I would have thought that, for example, you have a police chief in Minneapolis who's black and Hispanic. I would have thought that, therefore, that would have caused the community to feel, okay, maybe sometimes bad things are going to happen, but at least we know we got somebody in charge who's going to launch a thorough investigation. But it hasn't seemed to mollify these people in the streets. I don't know what they want.
Well, they don't. It's not just about the police department, because they want to tear the entire country down and are doing so at every possible opportunity. There's no question, and they say it straight up. They want to alter our values. They want to change the way America operates. They don't care much for our heritage, our culture. It is a cynical lot, the national left-wing media, who continue to support this Marxist nonsense, this activism, and this violence. Jameel Hill talking about this country. I mean, when she says it's just as bad as Germany, Nazi Germany, where are the people who normally would be going through the roof at somebody using that kind of language, referring to Nazi Germany, but letting this go unchallenged? It is absolutely ridiculous, a comment like that, and it is obscene. Going through the roof at somebody using that kind of language, referring to Nazi Germany, but letting this go unchallenged. It is absolutely ridiculous, a comment like that, and it is obscene to say it. And by the way, she's got the right to say it. I'm not asking her to take back her word, but it's obscene.
I thought we entered into a new frontier when Drew Brees very innocently said, "I will never respect anybody who disrespects the flag. I will never agree with anybody who disrespects the flag." He apologizes again, then his wife apologizes. I knew we were in a whole different place. Now, I'll tell you what, if and when Mike Ditka, who also said he does not appreciate people kneeling, if and when Mike Ditka apologizes, I'm moving to Cuba.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to get your visa, I can assure you of that. Larry Elder, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Good to have you with us. We'd like to hear your thoughts on all of this. Share your comments. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. Programming note, John Solomon, Dr. Michael Pillsbury among our guests tomorrow. We would like you to join us, please. We thank you for being with us tonight. We're up next. John Brennan and James Comey say they aren't targets of the Durham investigation. Is that wishful thinking? We haven't heard that from Durham, have we? We'll take it up with Judicial Watch's Tom Fenton right after these quick messages. We promise to be right back. Stay with us.
Hey.
A lot of problems about ballots in the mail. It turns out that every concern about absentee voting and mail-in ballots is pretty well justified. 72% of absentee voting precincts in Detroit, think about this, 72%, did not match the number of ballots cast in the state's primary 3 weeks ago. Back in 2016, presidential candidate Jill Stein wanted a recount in Michigan, but 37 of Detroit's precincts couldn't do it because there were more ballots in the voting machines than what poll workers had counted. The Democrats want you to believe there's no problem with this? Are you kidding? John Brennan, James Comey, they don't think they're targets of John Durham's Obamagate investigation. Brennan says Durham told him during his 8-hour interview at the CIA headquarters Friday that he wasn't. Now, why would they be at the CIA headquarters? Does that strike you as passing strange? It does me. Comey says, by the way, he can't imagine that he's a target. I wonder what the people at the CIA think. Durham hasn't said that they are targets. He hasn't said they aren't. Joining us tonight is Tom Fenton. He is the president of Judicial Watch. He has a new book. It's called A Republic Under Assault, The Left's Ongoing Attack on American Freedom. It's available for pre-order right now. We recommend it to you highly. Tom Fenton, good to see you. This is, first of all, explain to me how the former CIA director under investigation by Durham, whether he's a target or not, is at the CIA headquarters for that investigation.
Well, it sounds like old home week. Maybe they needed to review classified information. Of course, that could have been done in other locations. You know, my concern is it's been, 16 plus months since Durham was appointed, and only now is he questioning Mr. Brennan. And, you know, I think Mr. Brennan is probably calling it right. I hope he's wrong that he isn't a target. I think Comey believes he isn't a target. And they might think otherwise if there were serious investigations or a serious investigative approach evident, and I'm not seeing it. I don't see grand juries operating. I don't see a bunch of witnesses coming in. I don't see lawyers, complaining about their clients being brought in before Durham. You know, you saw during the Mueller investigation. That's what a serious criminal investigation it looks like. Even though it was corrupted, you know when the government's bringing pressure on witnesses and subjects, and that is not evident here. And I don't think it's because Durham's being careful. I think because he's not doing the work.
You think Durham is not doing the work. So what you're really saying, it seems to me, is, if I'm inferring correctly, is that if he's not doing the work, this investigation is a sham.
The Kleinsmith prosecution was handed to him on a silver platter last year. And the guy finally pleads out, and in the plea,
we're talking about Kevin Kleinsmith,
the FBI lawyer who authored the document about Carter Page.
Yes.
Obstruction of justice, you name
Yes.
it. And he pleads out and says, well, I did it, yeah, but I didn't mean anything. I thought it was true. So he's pleading out while denying he did anything wrong.
And was allowed to do so again in a court by the presiding judge of the FISA courts, which had been defrauded by this man, who seemed to take it all, in his, candy and syrup. It was ridiculous. And what did the government get for it? Nothing that we can see. Kleinsmith looks like he's free as a bird. I just wonder who we're going to be comparing him to, and what and why this FBI has taken 16 months to get to this point. I have to tell you, I'm a little concerned that the FBI is no longer an investigative agency, because if this is the way they operate, it's going to take them decades to deal with anything of real complexity. This had a lot of moving parts, but the fact is, what is in the public view right now is enough to bring charges against I don't know how many people. You name the number, 12, 24, it's ridiculous.
Well, Kleinsmith wasn't arrested, but they managed to arrest Stephen Bannon. The comparison and contrasting to me is just remarkable.
So absentee ballots, the president says are all right. Mail-in votes are not. We're watching, again, more problems with these mail-in votes. Why in the world isn't somebody doing something about it? It's really deeply concerning that we're going into an election on November 3rd, and I don't know how much strength the Republican Party has at each voting place, and meanwhile, it looks like there may be about 80 million ballots that should be questioned because of what we're seeing now, just produced anecdotally in jurisdiction and state after state.
51 million ballots are going to be mailed out. 40 million plus ballot applications going to be mailed out. Not the people who've asked for them, but just mailed out straight out. So you're going to have the system awash in ballot and ballot applications. In the primaries, according to the Washington Post, just recently, across the country, they threw out at least 334,000 ballots. Push that up during the November elections. You're talking potentially millions of Americans relying on the mails to vote, mistakenly, in my view, may be disenfranchised. To me, it's a moral obligation to get people to vote in person, because I don't want your vote or anyone else's vote, Lou, to be lost in the mail or not counted because our election system's been overwhelmed.
And everyone remembers the president talking about whether we might have to do the election over. He said that just off the cuff. The fact is, that's exactly what's happening in Paterson, New Jersey, where the city council election, there's allegation of mail-in voter fraud, and they're going to have to do that election over, and it's happening in jurisdiction after jurisdiction. Tom Fitton, great to have you with us. Good to see you. Thank you. Up next, former President Obama reveals just how radical Joe Biden's presidency might be if he were to win. We take that up and more in just a few moments. And my new book, The Trump Century, How Our President Changed the Course of History Forever. You can pre-order it. Get your copies at my website, LouDobbsShop.com and Amazon.com. We're coming right back.
As a character.
Earlier in the broadcast, we told you CNN cut away from President Trump's speech at the Republican National Convention in Charlotte. Listen to what CNN's Anderson Cooper and John King then said about what they had heard from the President of the United States.
John King, I mean, this was very similar. I mean, it is sort of all the most recent greatest hits and false statements by the president. And I imagine what we're going to hear a lot this week from the president, who clearly wants to be out front every single day.
It underscores the challenge, Anderson, for us in the news business, and really for people watching at home, if you are a voter who has not decided, if you are a voter who is not firm in your decision, to watch the next 4 days, because this is a sad thing to say, but a lot of what you just heard from the President of the United States is wrong, misleading, or outright lies. Wrong, misleading, or outright lies.
John King, wow. I mean, what you're watching over there, if you're watching it at all, it's bizarre, as if there is no conscience, no standard, and they represent all of that. Well, breaking news now. The national left-wing media is celebrating former Arizona Senator Jeff Flake as he becomes just the latest rhino to endorse China Joe Biden. The Trump campaign says, quote, Joe Biden has been a failure in the Washington swamp for half a century, so no one should be surprised when swamp creatures gather to protect one of their own. Rhinos backing Joe Biden insists he is a moderate and won't take a hard turn to the left. Do you think we're approaching the election? However, former President Obama says quite the opposite. He says there isn't much difference between Biden and Sanders. Obama telling the New Yorker, quote, "If you look at Joe Biden's goals and Bernie Sanders' goals, they're not that different from a 40,000-foot level." Don't you love how the former president considers himself to be at the 40,000-foot level? Going on, he said, a lot of times the issue has to do with, quote, how do we go about that? And what are the coalitions we need? What I think the moment has done is to change some of those calculations, not necessarily because Joe's changed, but because circumstances have changed. And he went on and on. We didn't. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer running the return of college football for the Big Ten Conference. Several of the venerable Big Ten athletic directors are reportedly working on a 6-team, 10-game season. Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio State, and Penn State. But one reporter covering Ohio State says Whitmer is the one blocking the Michigan Wolverines from playing. And there are a lot of upset folks in the Big Ten. Talk about traditional football, tough, hard-nosed football. Well, not this fall, apparently. We'll see. China Joe Biden trying to laugh off the idea that he's afraid to leave his basement. He tried to laugh it off. Here he is talking with ABC's David Muir.
So when you hear the president say this guy's afraid to leave his basement,
guess what? I have left my basement, but here, in the meantime, 500 million people have watched what I've done out of my basement. And guess what? People are listening. People are listening.
Listening, he says. Well, joining us now, former Reagan White House political director, Fox Business political analyst Ed Rollins, Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Post columnist, Fox Business contributor Michael Goodwin, and good to have you both with us. And let's start with that response to David Muir and the tough follow-up questions that followed that. Ed, your thoughts about what a grilling he took at the hands of ABC News?
Well, he's not going to get a grilling anywhere from the mainstream media. They're more than content to let him sit in his basement, and they'll bring their cameras. The bottom line is he's not going to campaign in a traditional way. Meanwhile, the president's out there hitting spots everywhere, including today, several spots. And I think that'll have an impact. The other side of the story is here's a guy that's had a history of plagiarism in his speeches, and you would think on the major speech that everybody's applauding, that he takes the last closing line from a former Canadian socialist, so I think he wants to hide out. I think it's a safe spot, feels comfortable doing it, makes no mistakes in his basement. If he does, they can cover it up.
And others, Michael, have been talking about Biden plagiarizing two people, not only the Canadian socialist, a few words from him, but himself in one of his older speeches, and I do mean older. Your thoughts about plagiarizing yourself and Canadian socialists?
Well, I thought what was remarkable to me, Lou, about that interview was the way 500 million people. Joe Biden will say anything. If it's written down, it may well be plagiarized. But I'm just struck by how testy he becomes if he's challenged. And to me, when you watch more of that interview, these are generally softball questions, but they go to the heart of his strategy, and he gets angry. He gets testy the same way he always does. And so I think the media is doing a great disservice by not pressing him. I mean, every time he fights back like that, you see them kind of pull back. And I just think that it's really outrageous that he's, going, obviously intends to stay the whole campaign in the basement, make very selective, discreet visits to campaign stops, just enough to show that he's not living full time in the basement, and then return there. And he'll get coverage for when he comes out as though it's a big deal. But meanwhile, the president is out there every day, talks to the media almost every day. I mean, it's such a lopsided apparatus that's going on here, and yet Biden is right in one thing: he's getting away with it.
Let's talk about Muir. I mean, I don't know where. At some point, I would think somebody's going to ask this former vice president a tough question. Muir, let's roll this sound from Muir and Biden, in which he asks, "Can you win a presidential election?" He doesn't say from a basement. He says just from home. Let's listen to this.
Can you win a presidential election from home?
We will. We're going to follow the science, what the scientists tell us. We've been able to travel places when we've been able to do it in a way that we don't cause the congregation of large numbers of people.
Ed, your thoughts? Muir, I mean, I can't imagine you asking that question any tougher than David Muir did, except the question is, can you win from home?
The mainstream media is going to basically do everything they can to get Biden elected. They hate Trump and they hate Trump's people. The critical question, the first question any legitimate reporter would ask him is, why did you have over 1,000 of your delegates not vote for the platform that you and Bernie Sanders and he worked out together? It came out today that 1,000 of them voted no, over 1,000, because it wasn't progressive enough. It's the most socialist document that's come out of the Democratic Party in a long, long time, and it's not good enough. So my sense is Bernie Sanders and them all said, just be quiet, let's get him elected, and then we'll get what we want.
That seems to be the plan. Michael, you get the last quick word. Can Biden win from his basement?
Well, I think he will stay there until it proves that he can't. And that's why I think the president has some openings this week, obviously, with the convention in terms of the things that, as Ed said, with the delegates of the Democrats are not all on the same page on their agenda. The fact that he said nothing about the violence in the cities. I mean, the national urban crisis is a major opening for the Republicans. And I think if the president has a strong convention and people begin to rally around him, then Biden is going to have to come out of the basement, because the science no longer says you have to stay in your basement. The country is reopening, some of it fully open. So this notion that he's following the science by sitting in his basement is simply bunk. Nobody is telling him to do that.
He's just saving the nation. Michael, he's just saving the nation by not in any way interacting with the nation. Ed Rollins, Michael Goodwin, thank you both. Appreciate it. Up next, remember the left-wing national media's cries that there wouldn't be enough ventilators for China virus patients? Well, they've got a new complaint. We'll take that up and more with Dr. Mark Siegel. Stay with us. We're coming right back.
We made USAA insurance for veterans like family, who's always at the ready. So when they got a little surprise, they didn't panic. They got a bigger car for their soon-to-be bigger family.